Great to see you back here for our hour of learning. It has always been a meaningful hour, and so I'm deeply grateful that we can gather once again. We've done some extraordinary learning over the years, from a 98-year-old liberator of a camp to guests from Poland and Germany to a Zoom presentation last year. And I know this year's program will also be deeply meaningful. So, Rabbi Sapphire, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Sisselmein. We're so appreciative that you have chosen either to come back for the afternoon as we turn the corner on our day, or you've remained from this morning. I have a confession to make, which is that this is, in all of my 17 years at TVE, my first year running the hour of learning. So I'm grateful to Rabbi Sisselmein for this opportunity. For when this opportunity came forward, I could not turn it up. And hopefully you'll see why I'm so excited to have our guests with us here this afternoon. But before I introduce you, there are many members of our community who were with us last evening, whether in person or on Zoom, and were able to hear the sermon that I delivered. But there may be some of you who did not hear and perhaps are missing a little bit of context. So just a brief word. Last night I shared, and if you missed the sermon, sorry if you have some FOMO, but they'll all go out tomorrow for viewing. I spoke about the pain that we are feeling collectively as a Jewish people at this time, this collective sense of grief and trauma that we are carrying, perhaps along with individual traumas that we have suffered or experienced in our own life. And the question, of course, is what do we do with those feelings? It was in the spring. When did you publish your article, Dr. Miri? It was in May. Okay, so I'm not so far off. In the spring, our TVE mental health clinician, Tamar Foreman, and I came across this article that blew our minds, that were two brilliant clinicians applying the term traumatic invalidation to the way that we feel as a Jewish people. Tamar and I got a hold of the article, and I asked Tamar if she could hunt down Dr. Miri. Which took a little bit of time because it turns out this article went viral, I should say. So we were onto something. And it turns out that Dr. Miri Bar Halpern doesn't live in some far off place. She actually lives down Route 9 in Natick. And we were able to get a hold of her, and we thought we would love to bring her for a Shabbat workshop. Not only did she say yes, but when we got to talking, we realized that this would be an extraordinary topic to share at Yom Kippur. And also, she was available on Yom Kippur. Thank you. Thank you. And when we got to talking, Dr. Miri said, well, I actually have a few friends who are in town that I could bring with me. And once I heard about Arno and about Mubin, I'm in awe of your stories and your strength and all that you will have to teach us, but it was a unanimous yes. So my heart is so full to welcome all of you. Arno already has a clock here because I told him we didn't have enough time probably for everyone to say everything that we want to share today. But I thought that I would ask our speakers a few questions and we'll learn as much as we can. So our gratitude first. Let's start with some more formal introductions. If each of you would introduce yourselves, share a little bit more about your story, and perhaps what brings you today. Okay, let's make sure you each should have a mic. Let's make sure they work. Make sure we can hear you. Who's going first? Mubin?
You kept looking at me, so I guess I gotta go first. Shalom Aleichem, Salaam Alaikum. One of the earliest things I learned how to recite was Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And I only do that because really, and Mary will tell you, I do come from the religious perspective. And so I have this habit of encouraging, especially the Abrahamics, the Jews and Christians, to be more observant of this pathway. Okay, so channeling the rabbi, I want to see you more present during shul and Shabbat and everything else. Okay, good. Um, yes. And I'll get to it, I guess, later on, because really my angle, if you will, is that the Muslim personality called the Mahdi, the one who guides, that's his term, is actually who you call HaMashiach, because we believe that when he comes, he will be strengthened with the Ark of the Covenant. And I mean, that should just put an end to anything after that, right? So that's kind of my angle. And then I hope, and in this day and age of so much confusion and controversy and division, I keep saying that even though the prophets are brothers to one another, even if the followers behave like Abel and Cain. So there is hope at the end when the HaMashiach, the Mahdi, that's when we will actually get our act together. And it's unfortunate that it does require an act of divine intervention to do that, but let's help the process at least, right? So that's the way to be. Born and raised in Toronto, Canada, come from a Indian family, and grew up in Toronto, Canada. And I went to Quran school from the age of 5, very abusive environment, kind of introduced the idea of religion as something violent. When you're reading the Quran, and I always make this nuance, like Indians, they don't speak Arabic, right? So most Muslims are not Arabs, and they a lot of times don't even understand what they're saying. And so just like you have folks who may not know the Hebrew, but you'll transliterate and you'll read the transliteration of the Hebrew. So we would do that with the Arabic. We would actually learn the Arabic, but we wouldn't actually know what it was saying. So I did that, 7 days a week, 2.5 hours a day. I went to public school in the daytime, and it laid the foundation for an identity crisis that would hit me later in my life. So like society's calling me one way, religion, culture, community's calling me another way. I got to high school, wasn't bullied, wasn't picked on, wasn't the victim of racism or whatever. We were the cool kids of school, too cool. I had a house party. I got caught by my uncle. It was horrible. My life came crashing down before my very eyes. I told myself the only way I'm going to salvage my reputation is to get religious. So in 1995, I'm going to try to show the photo. In 1995, I ended up going to India and Pakistan. And in Pakistan, I was sent to a city called Quetta, where it just so happened that the Taliban were staged up in that city. So I became enamored by them. I wanted to be like them. I don't know if some of you can see that, but yeah, that's the guy who shows up at the protests. Yeah, that's this guy. And so I kept that up. Really, it was the 9/11 attacks that made me reconsider what I was getting myself involved in. I then actually left the country and spent 2 years in Syria. This is in 2002, before the war, so it's not so crazy for people to go to Syria at that time. But I actually was introduced to the Sufi way. And the Sufi way, we learned, I went through a period of de-radicalization. I learned how and why my interpretations were wrong. And surprisingly, there was actually a lot of pro-Jewish stuff in there because I always use this example, Parents for Peace, where we do the one-on-one interventions with radicalized youth, and many of whom are anti-Semitic and have anti-Jewish ideas. And I tell the one jihadist guy, I'm like, hey, there's this Muslim general, and he has this confidant who's a Jew, but he's not just any Jew, he's a rabbi. And he picked this rabbi over the Muslim guy. What do you think of this Muslim general? And 100% of the time they say, he's an infidel, he's a disbeliever because he's sitting with the disbelievers. I was like, that's interesting because I'm talking about Salah ad-Din and the rabbi is Maimonides. And so it shows that, it doesn't need to be this way. There are positive examples, and that's what I'm trying to highlight and build on. So basically, 2 years in Syria, I came back to Canada. I was actually, I guess I was a walk-in to the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. So I actually was recruited to be an undercover operative. I infiltrated a number of extremist and terrorist groups. We foiled a terrorist attack, basically. It would have been a significant attack in Canada. Yeah, it's hard for me to say, yeah, it was, but it was a pretty big deal. And then there was a court case. It lasted until 2010. That I got onto social media. By 2011, the war in Syria started. By 2012, the rise of ISIS was happening, and I was already running some fake accounts, and I'd infiltrated some of their networks. So the US government saw what I was doing, and they were like, hey, why don't you come over here and help us do this stuff? So from 2012 to 2020, I was just like eyebrow deep in anti-ISIS activities and all of that. And so this is where I found Parents for Peace, or Parents for Peace found me. Arnold will tell you a little bit more. We met in 2011 at a summit against violent extremism. They brought 4 categories of people: former ultranationalists, former white supremacists, former Islamists, and urban street gang members, and comparing how people got into these movements, what kept them in the movement, and what got them out of the movement. So that's where I met Arno. But just to wrap up, that's basically my quick life story. It's been really an honor and blessing to have Mary with us as well, and just a really good team of people who are really genuine and authentic about trying to do something, right? A lot of people talk. I frequently get triggered by the academics. I'm known for this, but there's a lot of talk. We would like to talk about action. What do we do from now? And then I know there are some questions about, like, it just seems like almost insurmountable sometimes. It just seems like you're just losing hope all the time. What can we do to regain that hope? So hopefully we can talk more about that as the conversation goes on. Thank you.
So Arna, go ahead and tell your story.
Hi everyone, my name is Arno Michaelis. I am an exit peer specialist at Parents for Peace, the organization Mubin mentioned, and where he and Dr. Miri and myself all work. Our mission at Parents for Peace is to coach families with a radicalized loved one regarding ways to create an environment that's most conducive to lead that person to a better place. And the reason I work as an exit peer specialist is because I am a former white nationalist. One of the distinctive things about Parents for Peace is that we approach hate as an addiction. And as an alcoholic myself, and as someone who was born genetically predisposed to addiction, looking back at my life, I can see that when I spent 7 years as a neo-Nazi skinhead, white nationalist, I was as addicted to hate as I was addicted to alcohol. And treating hate as an addiction means that it's possible to recover. It's possible to get clean from hate. And that's the objective we have when we're working with our cases. We not only coach families, we also coach the individuals of concern who are under the influence of any sort of violent extremist ideology. This is another distinctive thing about Parents for Peace, in that we address every violent extremist ideology that comes across to us. So that means Islamists, it means white nationalists, it means Antifa. And the common thread of all these violent extremist ideologies is anti-Semitism. As a person who is dedicated to combating violent extremism, and to give you a little timeline, I was involved in hate groups from 1987 till 1994, from the time I was 16 until I was 23. I went public with my story on the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday of 2010, so every year that's my anniversary. This coming January will mark 16 years doing this work. And as someone dedicated to countering violent extremism in civil society, I believe it's tactically essential to address anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism is the foundation of all of these different violent extremist ideologies. They all share a hatred of Jews, and they're happy to set aside their myriad other differences to vibe out over their hatred of Jews. And this is very readily evidenced in that if you were to go on the social media platform of your choice and just look at a white nationalist account, they are saying word for word the same disparaging lies about Israel, about Judaism, and about the Jewish people that the so-called pro-Palestinian movement is. This shocked me on October 7th, to see word for word the same anti-Semitic tropes I used as a white nationalist 30 years ago coming from the mouths of not knuckle-dragging skinheads, of not the Ku Klux Klan or neo-Nazis, but professors at Ivy League colleges, celebrities in Hollywood. When I was a white nationalist in 1987, one of the first things that happened is I was a skinhead, so I went out in the streets, I looked like a neo-Nazi, I got in fights, I caused a lot of ruckus in society. All these old school neo-Nazis came crawling out from under their rocks, and they would give us literature, they called it. This is what you need to read. And one of the first things I was given was a pamphlet called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The seminal grandfather of all contemporary anti-Semitism. And you can connect dots from the emergence of this faked hoax document in Russia around 1903 to the Bolshevik Revolution, to Nazi Germany, to Stalinist Russia, to the disinformation campaign led by the USSR in the 60s to discredit Israel because they wanted to cozy up to Arab countries, to today, the rhetoric we see in these encampments, the rhetoric we see at the Emmy Awards, all of it goes right back to the Protocols of Zion. And it's incredibly important to me to sound that alarm and let everybody know that this isn't a new concept that's coming out of their mouth. We called the United States the Zionist occupational government when I was a white nationalist. We accused Jews of being genocidal, oppressive colonizers. We believe that when land is occupied, resistance is justified. All of these concepts are the same concepts that motivated every act of white nationalist terror that has happened throughout the years. Every one of these terrorists felt that they were oppressed and they had no option but to kill innocent people. So today, I'm incredibly grateful to do this work as a peer exit specialist. I know that it's possible to recover from hate, and in the same way that a sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous would help someone on the path to sobriety, Mubin and I both work to help individuals under the influence of hate to set that hate aside and to move on and have a productive life. I'm incredibly grateful to all of you for joining us today at this learning session. I'm looking forward to great discussion, and Gamar Khatima Tova.
Thank you, Arno. So Miri, if you would take a few moments to introduce yourself and tell your story briefly as well.
I mean, my story is completely boring compared to these two.
Tell us where you're from.
I'm kidding, yes.
Okay.
So my name is Miri Bar Halprin. I'm an immigrant from Israel. I moved here in 2008. I grew up during the Second Intifada, and only when I moved here, I actually realized that my normal is actually abnormal, that most people do not have a safe room or do not have a shelter in their backyard. Fast forward, I got my doctorate here, met my husband who lost his father in 9/11, and really realized that I want to dedicate my life to understand trauma and help victims of trauma. So I did a deep dive. I worked in a lot of different levels of care. Specifically, I'm an author of a children's book for kids who were exposed to terrorism and war. And that was my life. Before October 7th, I was a director of intensive outpatient program here. I worked at McLean for years. I treated victims of trauma. October 7th happened, and everything changed for me. It was a complete identity crisis. My family is in Israel. My whole family is there. And while October 7th was a traumatizing moment, October 8th was a shocking moment for me. As someone who is in the trauma world, that all of my colleagues are trauma experts, I was shocked to find out that 2 people called me to see if I'm okay, if my family is okay. So out of my own fear, and we're going to talk about post-traumatic growth, but I'm a doer. I almost lost my kids for medical complication, and when they were in the hospital, what I did was doing. I helped other parents who go through a similar situation. So I knew my coping skill. So on October 7th, I actually wrote a post in the Israeli Facebook group saying, it wasn't my smartest ideas, but okay. I said, this is my cell phone number. I'm a trauma expert. If anybody needs support, call me. Yeah. I got flooded with phone calls, and I was very lucky to have a good network of people and very quickly mobilized a team of Israeli providers. And for over a year, we gave free support for the Israeli community and then to the Jewish community. And it went from webinars, seminars, one-on-one, groups. If there was a need, we were there. Immigrants from Israel, displaced families started to come here. We were sitting in schools to welcome them and to support them. And I started hearing those stories that sounded very familiar to the stories of my regular trauma patients, that people don't believe them, that they're denying their trauma, that other people are telling them, well, what about? Or telling them, it's not that bad, actually, or you're just imagining things. And there's a term for that, and I started collecting those stories, and that's how the article came about traumatic invalidation. So I did not coin the idea of traumatic invalidation. It's by Dr. Melanie Harney and Marsha Linehan, amazing psychologists in the field. I was just the first person to apply it to the Jewish community and to prove that we meet all 9 criteria of traumatic invalidation. And when that happens on a systematic level, it can actually create an existential crisis. So I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up in the air, but I would assume that the most people in this room have felt that feeling of, am I going crazy? What is happening right now? Is it all in my head? Is this person used to be my friend? Are they now against me? Is their silence actually because they thinking something different about me? Will they hide me if something happened? And I kept hearing it again and again. So it took a year, but we were finally able to publish this article because I wanted it to be in a peer-reviewed academic journal because I knew it's going to be invalidated because I'm Jewish and I'm Israeli, so you know I'm doomed. So after it was published, and what I'm very proud of in this article, and I always say I don't think it went viral because I'm this amazing writer. I think it went viral because it gave people the language. And once you name something, you can start healing from it as well. So fast forward, Parents for Peace heard me in one of my talks, and Miriam, who is the head of Parents for Peace, said, you don't need to fight alone, come join us. And I never heard about Parents for Peace before. This is a whole new world for me. So I went from intervention for people who are victims of crime to help the perpetrators of the same hate crimes. And I quit my job as of June of last year. And basically all I do now is advocacy and public speaking and help people out of the hate cycle. Because like Arno was saying, and I'm very passionate about it because I did not know that. I didn't have this knowledge that anti-Semitism is this connective tissue across all ideologies. I didn't grow up here. I didn't grow up with anti-Semitism. Those are the stories I heard from my grandparents. I'm a third-generation Holocaust survivor. I didn't imagine that I'm going to go through the same things that my grandparents were going through back then when they were going through the Holocaust. So people ask me, why do I do what I do? I do it because of my grandparents, and I do it for my children. I don't see any other way. So that's why I have those people around me to give me hope, and I'm very grateful for them and for Parents for Peace.
Amen. So thank you, each of you, for sharing your stories. So you have clearly put out there the pain that we are feeling in the world. I'm sure you hear more directly about it through your work. Can you begin to tell us, and maybe we'll start with Dr. Miri this time, how it is that we begin to deal with this pain, and perhaps what are the first steps for us to be that doer that you are teaching us to be?
So the first thing is, like I said, is you need to name it. If we don't know what we're going through, we're not going to be able to heal from it. And the healing is one step at a time. I'm still healing. And healing can look at different ways, and it's not a linear road. It can go back and forth. I mean, I woke up today after hearing the news about Manchester, just completely deflated and not hopeful. But then I remembered I'm coming here and I have my upstanders with me, and that gives me hope again. So like I said, first thing is healing, is to identify what's been happening to you and understand the symptoms that come with it. And that's going to look different for each one of you. For some people, it's the hypervigilant. For other people, it's kind of like that feeling of burnout. A lot of people said that they feel that dissonance between identities if they work in non-Jewish places where they need to put a mask on when they go to work, when they're with friends, because they don't think that they're going to understand them. Knowledge is power. So understanding what you're going through is the first part of healing. And then figure out what are your values. What is important to you? Because agency is the best antidote for trauma. Doing anything. It can be, I'm not going to protest. I'm not a protest person. I learned the hard way that it's not for me. But it might be reaching out to someone. It might be tzedakah. It might be something under tikkun olam. It might be having an event and bringing people together. Communities is really important. Being together in a place where you can feel seen with all your intersectionality of identity, showing up and not feeling scared, that sense of belonging, that's a huge part of healing as well. So all of that are different part of the puzzle. And then who you are as an individual is also part of the healing, right? Because for some people, it might be music or art or going outside, going outdoors, doing things, but doing it in a mindful way. Being able to say, I am choosing to do something is really important, because trauma is a loss of top-down, literally from the brain. The part of the brain that is in charge of control and executive functioning and problem solving and just kind of like being a functional person in the world, even direct communication. When we're under trauma or acute stress, that part just shuts down, because the part of the brain that's about emotion is taking over, the fight, flight, freeze response. But if you're doing something mindfully, if you're saying, choosing, and it can be, I'm choosing to get out of bed. I'm choosing to come to temple today. I'm choosing to go for a walk. If you're saying it in a mindful way, you're making a choice to take the control back. And that is very grounding. And when you're doing it based on your values, it's extra brownie points.
We call those mitzvah points, especially.
Mitzvah points, sorry,
yes.
extra mitzvah points.
So Arno or Mubin, if you'd like to add from your perspective how it is that we act and break this cycle of pain.
Yeah. So I'm going to, of course, start with the religious side of things, right? You have to be connected with the Lord, right? With the Creator. Those of us who kind of come from this perspective, we really make it a point. This is why I really like the Kabbalists, because Sufis and Kabbalah are very similar, and any of Chabad types love the Chabad. But it's that whole idea, think about it, many of whom will say, they just go off in the woods and try to connect with God. And look at how that's perceived as, it's either not doing something that you're supposed to be doing. But I think that is the most important thing you can do. When connecting with the Creator, especially of us who come from that one God, in one sense we can say, monotheism. Let's use that as the general thing. So turning to God, and truly turning to God, not doing it as just you're reciting certain liturgical prayers. No, like meaningfully connecting to God. You don't even need to recite prayers to connect with God. You don't even need to utter words. If you can get to the point where you're actually communicating from your heart, even better. So number one, I would say, is that lean on the faith. This is the most important thing. Everything, we say, comes from God, returns to God. So if we're looking for this change, or we're upset with what's happening and we would like to see something else, God doing something else, because frequently I've caught myself with, my God, don't you see what's happening? Don't you see this? Why aren't you doing something about it? We demand of God, do something. But then we're reminded also that, look, God's will is His will. He does what He wills without question, right? Arnold's Buddhist, so it's like a way of no way, right? Like in Taoism. It's like if good comes your way, if bad comes your way, it's not even good or bad, it's just the way. And for those who believe in God, we say that God sends good and God sends not good. And we got to be okay with all of that, right? And that's very difficult. So lean on the faith And I'll give 2 points. Lean on the faith and lean on each other. You cannot be the hero that you're gonna save the community by yourself. That's not gonna happen. That's for movies and Superman and the Marvel universe and all that, right? In reality is we are social creatures. We need each other, like true need. So even if we personally might feel like I have everything going right for me, I have a good job, my kids, my this, my that, good for you if you're at that place. So now make yourself available to somebody else. Serve your other. And that's how you serve your community. Otherwise, if you try to do it on your own and everybody trying to kind of do their own thing, you're going to weaken the links in the chain. And this is a conflict that you're facing. This is I'm very realistic, especially my previous work experience and stuff. I mean, my backpack that I have with me, I carry a trauma kit in my backpack everywhere I go. Like, largely because I'm Canadian, I'm in Canada, I'm in the US, and it's like, and I don't mean to say this, like, I don't want to make light of it. It's like, you don't know where the next shooting is going to happen, right? We're just saying about the synagogue attack while services are going on, right? So expect that there are very malevolent, evil people out there. They don't care if you're elderly or disabled or a child or like as we saw in the October 7 attacks. And there will be sick, twisted people out there who are your colleagues at work, your kids' fellow students, who are okay with supporting all of that. Like that, it's bad that we have to sit with that reality, but that is a reality. Maybe you might have to teach your kids this. Like if you hear somebody saying something or whatever, yeah, you might want to say, yeah, you should, call them out every time, this and that. But other times you won't do that because it's going to be physically injurious to you if you do. If you get mobbed by people or this and that, and they'll take your life for nothing. So this is the society we live in. I'm sorry to kind of be that way, but that's what I mean by taking care of each other as well. So lean on the faith and lean on each other.
The most frequently asked question I get is, how did you get out? And the simple answer is exhaustion. Again, going back to the truth that hate is an addiction, just like alcohol or crack cocaine. If you go to a Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, you'll see a room full of people who are all there because they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. That is the experience of addiction. When you're an addict, you spend every waking moment either pursuing the substance you're addicted to, consuming it, or suffering the consequences afterwards. And then it just starts again. These tropes of having a monkey on your back or chasing a dragon are actually very apt. And after 7 years of being involved in white nationalism, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. One of the main reasons why that exhaustion was so poignant was because the light that Jewish people had shone upon the world. I was a huge fan of Hollywood movies my entire life. I was a big fan of art and TV and literature and sports, and all of these things were forbidden to white nationalists because they were all seen as Jewish propaganda to numb the minds of white people to make them easier to oppress. So I couldn't root for the Green Bay Packers in good conscience. I couldn't watch movies from Hollywood. I couldn't enjoy my favorite movie that I was in a rock band, and that movie was This Is Spinal Tap, written and directed by the genius Rob Reiner and Harry Shearer and all sorts of other Jewish people who made that happen. I certainly couldn't enjoy what had accidentally become my favorite sitcom in the world, which is Seinfeld. But more poignantly than these pop culture aspects that I really took to heart and really wanted to enjoy was the truth that there were Jewish people I came across during my 7 years as a white nationalist who, instead of reflecting my hostility as I wanted to happen, I wanted everybody to reflect my hostility and respond to my hate with hate of their own. There were Jewish people in my life who said, I'm not going to play by your rules. Instead, I'm going to demonstrate for you how a human being should treat another human being. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I'm a gifted genius. My mom says so you can't argue with mom. As a 16-year-old gifted genius, what need do I have for high school? I know everything. So I dropped out of high school despite my parents' best attempts. I moved out of the house from a suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, into a kind of seedy part of Milwaukee. My mother, being very practical, was like, we can't pay your rent, so if you're gonna move out, you need to get a job. And I'm like, yeah, I'll get a job. She's like, you won't get a job on your own as a 16-year-old, so I'm gonna talk to my high school friend, Jack Cooper, who has a business printing t-shirts, and ask him to give you a job. He did give me a job, and so at age 16, I was printing t-shirts 40 hours a week, third shift, and in the beginning honeymoon phase of my neo-Nazi skinhead time of my life. So I'm showing up to Jack's business with swastika tattoos and swastikas on my jacket and a shaved head, typically covered with scars and stitches, and being vocally racist and anti-Semitic to all my coworkers. This got back to my mother, who called Jack up in tears, humiliated, saying, Jack, I understand if you fire my son. I'd fire him if I were you. I wouldn't put up with that. And rather than fire me, Jack said, he's a good kid. He's just going through a phase. And not only did he allow me to keep my job, but he hired my skinhead buddies to sell the t-shirts that I was printing. So me and my guys actually had a means to support ourselves thanks to the good graces of a Jewish man. And then we'd go back to our band and write songs about how the Jews take all our money to give to lazy black people who don't want to work. This hypocrisy wore upon me and really drove that exhaustion. I left hate groups in 1994. I went on a rave bender, being a man of polar opposites. Public with my story in 2010, as I mentioned. And really from about 95 until October 7th, 2023, I really led a hate-free existence. The first book I wrote was called My Life After Hate. And I'm like, yay, you don't have to have hate in your life, and everything's great, and we can all get along, and there's hope and optimism. We're all a big human family. And then October 7th happened. And I was utterly destroyed by the fact that I had went to stand with the victims of all of these horrible hate mass casualty events from the August 5th, 2012 Sikh temple shooting in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to the shooting at Emmanuel AME in South Carolina, to the shooting in Squirrel Hill, Pittsburgh, at the shoal there. And every time the whole world came together behind these people who were attacked. And October 7th, not only did the whole world not come together, half the world blamed the people who were attacked. And after October 7th, I found myself in a very uncomfortable position of relapse. I felt hate again. I hated Hamas. I hate the regime that hijacked Iran, that sponsors all this terror. I hate the people who cheer for them and validate their hatred. And then I realized I'm relapsing. And even though the hate I felt after October 7th was, I believe, very righteous and justified, whereas the hate I felt 30 years ago was based on lies and my own hatred for myself. Nonetheless, hate is hate. My refuge since October 7th has been the Jewish community. Mubin and I and Miri have spoken at all sorts of conferences all over the country, Mubin all over the world, about how to counter anti-Semitism. I've been to many events at the JCC where I live in Milwaukee. After the bodies of the Bibas children, the Bibas family were recovered, I went to a memorial at the shoal in my community, and I was so angry and so hateful, and I went and sat with the Jewish community where I live, where the suffering and the trauma and the outrage and the anger were all palpable, but there was not a shred of hate there. I know what hate looks like. An addict knows what the substance they're addicted to looks like. I have not seen hate when I've been in fellowship with the Jewish community. So to answer this question, what I believe is that Jews need to continue shining that light on the world, as difficult as it is. I can't imagine how difficult it is when you feel like the entire world is out to get you, but know you're not alone. That Mubin and I are two of millions upon millions of allies who have your back and will stand with you. And the world needs the light that Judaism shines now more than ever. So please continue to shine that light. Find fellowship with each other, with your many, many allies out in civil society. And I firmly believe that we can not only get through this dark time, but emerge to a better one down the road.
I'm sitting over here with tears welling up in my eyes, and I think the emotion I feel is affirmation. And it feels really beautiful to hear your words and your teaching so far. I'm going to ask one more question. All of you have alluded to it. We were going to leave time for questions from all of us today. There are so many of us, but let me, before I ask my last question, spoiler alert, Dr. Miri will return to our community on Friday evening, December 12th. We've confirmed the date. So I want you to connect with me if you have questions or further topics that you would like to hear from Miri when she returns to our community, and this will absolutely be to be continued. We knew that we had that our time was short and so much wisdom and wisdom to share. So I just want to express gratitude one more time, because the fact that Arno and Mubin are here with us is just such a blessing for us. So thank you. I want to ask one more question, which is that we all are encountering people in our lives, as you have mentioned, at work, on our college campuses, perhaps even people within our own family who are stirring up those feelings that you started to mention, Arno. And I'm curious what we can do in relationship with these folks who are in our lives, who might be not holding the same values that we hold. So let's conclude with that question. You guys have your clock there. It's 3 o'clock. Let's take like 5 minutes total. Okay? I know it's not a lot.
I'll be as quick as I can. Very simple truth, simple tool that I use on a daily basis, and that is that hurt people hurt people. Now, fortunately for humanity, not all hurt people, because I'm a Buddhist, as Mubin mentioned, and Buddhism 101 is if you live, you suffer. And the whole faith is about how to manage that and how to suffer less. But when people don't have a healthy way to process their trauma and process their suffering, they have a tendency to pass it on to other people. So when we encounter people who are hateful, who are toxic, who are offensive, who hurt our hearts with what they say and what they do, when we remind ourselves that hurt people, it positions us to respond to their aggression with compassion, which first and foremost means they're not controlling us. We have agency, as Dr. Miri points out. And second of all, I know from experience that compassion is a very powerful way to extinguish and transform aggression, whereas if we meet aggression with aggression, it's like a law of physics, all you're gonna get is more aggression. So remind yourselves that hurt people, and that you have agency to respond to aggression with compassion.
Yeah, very well said. And I want to kind of just remind all of you, of course, who is the suffering servant in Isaiah, book of Isaiah, right? It's the people of Israel. Thank God this is not a Jews for Jesus, because they're like, no, that's us. It's like, it's not you guys. Jewish invalidation, there you go, right? No, this is, even me, Muslim, from Muslim perspective, I even look and I see, and this is some of the things that I learned, is that, the majority of prophets came from Bani Israel. By default, the majority of righteous people that came, because the believers for the vast majority of our revelation history were Jews, Bani Israel. So you are all the most, what's the word? Like you're experienced with this more than anybody else. And you've developed coping mechanisms, right? That people are always going to be like this. And I thought, I said, I'm going to put the Jewish hat on. It's a Muslim hat. And just to think that, and it was very similar, like when I'm feeling like, oh, there's all this anti-Muslim stuff that's out there. And then I'm always reminding myself, I'm like, yeah, just switch this stuff out and put in Jewish and stuff. And then that's what you're feeling is what the Jewish people are feeling, right? So I kind of thought to myself, yeah, how would I deal with that, right? Like when I'm feeling this way. So one is acknowledging that there is this divine covenant with God in which all these things are going to happen, right? And they've happened. We've seen it throughout history. So one is that this is just how things are at one level, okay? The other thing is that, and I don't know if it's good or bad, I don't know what it is, but this is something that I would do. When I was saying earlier about, it's almost like this wary eye onto the rest of society. Is that, my colleague, my coworker, my neighbor, this and that, like, and again, I'm not saying be suspicious of your neighbor. They might become an anti-Semite tomorrow, but they might. In fact, some probably are right now. So like Arno was saying, and I learned this also through experiences, that you are not going to lecture anybody into, knowledge, right? People are very ignorant. They've subscribed to completely fictitious narratives of identity and place and purpose. Like they're completely made up things, right? Like I was saying, and again, I don't want to invalidate what Palestinians are going through, this, that, and the other, but just even for me, Muslim perspective, it's like, even in the Quran, David alayhi salam, peace be upon him, is the prophet of God who kills Goliath, who's from the Philistines. And so I found it odd that Muslims are basically putting their weight behind this nation that was already destroyed by a prophet of God in the Quran. So now we don't want to completely deny the history, the people, and however people come to understand themselves. So you are not going to lecture them into it. You're not going to browbeat them with historical facts and in this year and in that year, and just ask ChatGPT, who's been there longer. There are different ways you can deal with it, but the compassion and modeling the right behavior is the better way forward. Last anecdote, I was at the Combating Anti-Semitism conference in Australia that was in Gold Coast, and there were a bunch of protesters that came out when all of us went for dinner, right? And they were like, how many children starved to death while you guys were having dinner? Like stuff like that, right? A rabbi who was with us actually says, he goes, yeah, I'm going to come out with you, Chabad rabbi, of course, right? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to come outside with you. And he comes out and he's all like happy and joyful. And even the protester guys were like looking at him like, what's wrong with this guy? Like smiling, happy. He's like, yeah, the Palestinian. The guy was like, yeah, the Palestinian. He's like, yeah, terrible situation. So tell me about yourself. Just the way that he segued out of that, I was just like, this is a pro at work, So that is the better way to be, I think, when you're dealing with these kinds of people.
I used to say that we're like a walking joke. You have a former neo-Nazi, a former jihadist, and an Israeli walking into a bar. But now I'm also thinking we have a religious Buddhist and a Jew, a scientist, in a stage together. So I'm going to put it all together for us. We have the faith, leaning in with faith, and finding a grain of truth in the other person, seeing their perspective. Validation is not about agreement. Validation is about being able to see the other person's perspective and to see a person as a person, human as a human and not as problem. Listening to the other person so you can understand them and not so you can respond. And leaning in with compassion. Compassion is work. It's very similar to Arno. I've lost my compassion after October 7th. And compassion was such a high value of mine. I'm a trauma psychologist. I need to have compassion. And I found myself struggling with it. I'm going to tie it to what I said before about agency and choice. I chose to have compassion and to act based on my values and my compassion because I'm not going to let other people take this value away from me. So when people are spewing hate or invalidating my pain, like Arno was saying about that rabbi, I would see them as a human being and ask them, okay, let's lean in with curiosity. I'm going to try to see your perspective. Can you see my perspective? Can we see ourselves as human being and actually have a conversation? Critical thinking is a thing these days. Not a lot of people have them, but can we try to see other people's perspective? And when you lead in with compassion, when you have your community and your upstanders next to you, and considering the fact that most of us are resilient, we are very resilient as human beings, we can also shift the needle from resiliency to post-traumatic growth. Agency, validation, compassion, and faith, whatever your faith is. Those are my go-to.
So I'm going to stay on time, and no, I don't know if we have time to sing. You can feel free to sing while I'm wrapping up, but I'm going to try to short. I just want to point out, I guess I'm going to get brownie points for saying this, Dr. Miri, but this was
Points.
mitzvah points. This was an absolute example of teshuvah, what you just mentioned. So on Yom Kippur Day, there is no greater example for us than to look inward. We can look forward too. But today, to look inward and to ask ourselves, what are our values? In what way do we want to lead this year? And how do we want ourselves forward? And that is the answer in bringing forth what we want to see from ourselves and also, God willing, from other human beings as well. So with that, we are at time. But Friday, December 12th, Dr. Miri is going to return for Shabbat. We'll welcome you. We'll be a little bit smaller over here in our regular sanctuary, more intimate evening, a workshop to be able to learn together. But let's take one more opportunity. Thank you for coming from Toronto, Naveen. Thank you for joining us from Milwaukee. Officially conclude by saying that we are going to start the hour of response at 3:15. So if you're here, you're staying. Please come in from the back if you are waiting. We're just going to take a brief picture up here. It is not lost on me that you're from Toronto and Milwaukee, so I'm going to say go Red Sox. And we will see you all in 5 minutes.
עולם חסד ייבנה